And we are back. Let's continue.
But these aren't general opinions. These are targeted.
These are targeted at somebody.
That sounds like he's being like he's making a joke.
So
I understand.
In context, it sounds like the other one. Like in context, what he's saying, particularly the fact that he's a white guy, that doesn't sound like a racial slur at all. I mean, he's saying "fuck white people," and he is white.
In context, again, these are tied together.
Right.
I always knew that person was not to be trusted. That fucking Jewish slur.
Oh.
So there's a lot. Like there's a bunch of
very
things.
specific person.
He's targeting.
He's being trying to be very provocative.
And he's saying this about a specific Jewish person.
I don't know the race of this person. I'm sorry.
Right.
In defense of Sargon, this allegedly anti-Semitic tweet was aimed at Andrew Anglin of white supremacist publication The Daily Stormer, and was clearly meant in jest. As for his helicopter tweet to @TimoGeo, it's painfully obvious Carl was being hyperbolic.
I don't know. Was Carl being hyperbolic when he says that this is how I know that one day I'll be throwing you from a helicopter? You're the same kind of malignant cancer. Don't forget it. I don't know. I think this is akin to Kraut threatening to drill Jim's kneecaps. I think this is from the sort of deep-seated contempt that resides within the hearts of these people.
A little strong-worded. It remains difficult to justify removing anybody from what is essentially public discourse for such sentiments, especially given there was a larger context in both cases.
It does sound like at least the first one was meant to be a critique of your. So
potentially, but there are a bunch of others if you want to hear them.
More than
sure. Keep it rolling.
This is again targeted. This is how I know one day that I'll be throwing you from a helicopter. You're the same kind of malignant cancer. Don't forget it.
With a cow-worshipping robot overseeing the policing of content and absolutely no method of appeal, Twitter's terms of service are amongst Silicon Valley's worst. But one can't help but think that many of these right-leaning grifters poke the nest willingly, offering themselves up as a sacrificial lamb to the cause. Sargon has, after all.
This is a good point for Porsalin. I don't think he delves into it even further. But make no mistake that these people, I mean, these people would get a spike in their audiences and recognition if they were deplatformed from a platform like Twitter, like Facebook. It would certainly get people writing articles about it, and it would raise their profile slightly. So, you know, if you want credibility, you want some street cred, you get yourself banned from Twitter. Was Sargon actively trying to get banned from Twitter in order to produce an artificial news cycle and present himself as a victim? Probably. No, I wouldn't put that past him. Do I think this thing happened accidentally, and then he just tried to use it as a means for self-promotion? I think that's probably the most likely outcome. I think that's what Sargon was actually going with. But, I mean, Porsalin, he doesn't delve into it, but as I say, I mean, you get yourself banned from Twitter, it gives you street cred. Milo did it, and it got him a great deal of attention. It was sadly his very own "it depends on the child" comments that got him deplatformed from life. You know, they got him deplatformed from multiple speaking tours, and his own book was shredded by his own publisher. But the spike he got from being banned from Twitter, it was one that people like Sargon would have looked at in envy. You know, Milo's been banned, now I'm going to get banned.
All treated his Twitter feed as a verbal dumping ground for years, despite being fully aware of the repressive environment Jack Dorsey has cultivated, and to post videos afterwards sharing his insincere disbelief at his removal from the platform smacks of manufactured outrage.
If there are any Twitter accounts that are posting claiming they're me, they're not me. I'm not using Twitter. And honestly, I think I'm just going to let the platform die off.
Having on multiple occasions made an embarrassing spectacle of himself in the face of who he deemed alt-right trolls, Sargon had finally stumbled on a foolproof solution. If you beat the white nationalists and race realists on ideas, you undermine their validity as a group. Once exposed intellectually, these alt-righters will have no choice but to lay down arms and bow to the mighty Carl of Swindon. But to achieve this, Sargon needed help. Cue the skeptic community.
The word community means the condition of sharing or having certain attitudes and interests in common. There's a lot.
Now, I don't think Sargon tackled the alt-right in terms of ideology, at least not at first. I think the ideology stuff was tacked on when when he decided to, when he read a bit of Locke or listened to a bit of Locke and thought that was the ideological grounding for which he could tackle the alt-right. I think initially himself, Kraut, Mundane Matt, they all sat around and they thought, okay, Gamergate's dying. Whatever Gamergate was has evolved into the alt-right. And there's now a proper literary foundation. There's a political foundation to what this is, and it's not just about video games anymore. It's about the system that's it's about the actual system that's perpetuated this, not just the feminist system, but the system that has extended beyond the media into politics, into social life, and into the blood of people, of genetics. Sargon saw the writing on the wall, and him and Monday Matt thought, there's only one way we can really go. If we become alt-righters ourselves, then we're going to get deplatformed. This YouTube gravy train, it's gonna end for us. You know, there's not a financial future in this. I certainly can't carry on making 12 grand a month if everyone thinks I'm alt-right. So he tried to position himself against it, and then he made these very silly mistakes. First of all, he positioned himself against it because it was purely based on money, purely based on him wanting to keep ad revenue, and wasn't really based on the ideas. So therefore, he didn't recognize the deep hypocrisy in him advocating for, you know, white male gamers and pretending that, you know, his audience and fan base and the people who watched his videos weren't white male gamers. You know, pretending that he had this ethnically diverse audience and pretending and lying that he was this, you know, half black, you know, thinker, foremost ideasman of our time. And secondly, the way he failed was he positioned himself against candidates who he simply had done no research on. You know, not just him positioning himself against Spencer, but him positioning himself against millennial woes. You know, I'm sure to many on the left, millennial woes is an easy win, but positioning himself against Andrew Anglin and just not engaging with the ideas, you know, simply thinking that he could laugh and you know, this person's a Nazi, ho, 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 here's some gay pornography. And then not really engaging on an intellectual level. Maybe because he was incapable of doing so, who knows? But the comment that did pierce him was the "you think you're smarter than you are" from Richard Spencer. And that was a seminal moment in sort of radicalizing Sargon. You know, a lot of jihadis are radicalized by, I don't know, imams, by preachers in England that send them abroad to do despicable things for ISIS. Sargon was radicalized by someone saying, you're not as smart as you think you are. But, I mean, the point here is that Sargon entered into this ideological disagreement with the alt-right in entirely the wrong way.
Lots of resistance in the skeptic community to this term, probably because of the homogeneous nature of other communities on the internet, but it is an accurate description of what we are.
At Sargon's request, a miserable collective of self-important pseudo-intellectuals were tasked with humbling the alt-right with their cosmic-minded intellects. This merry band of insufferable faggots included the likes of micro-packing banana man the amazing atheist, scruffy tramp Thunderfoot, and estrogen-breasted gopher Mundane Matt. And along with Crowton T, Armoured Skeptic, and Jeff Holiday, a legion of cerebral Goliaths were ready to destroy the alt-right with an onslaught of unshakable logic.
I have enjoyed several conversations with individuals and groups of people who identify as alt-right, with the intention of understanding what this movement is. The phrase alternative right was coined by Richard Spencer in 2010 and has become an umbrella term to describe a neo-reactionary movement to push back against progressive domination of political and social spheres. The alt-rights are not liberals or conservatives, and nor do they claim to be. They are as radical as their counterparts on the authoritarian left, as they both desire massive changes to the system.
And this was the birth of the horseshoe theory. This was the skeptics' big big galactic brain take on the whole issue, that everyone resides on this horseshoe, that the alt-right and the left, the far left, are just two different sides of the horseshoe, or two different ends of the horseshoe, and to be truly based and and enlightened, you must reside in the center of the horseshoe, or even outside of the horseshoe, looking down upon the horseshoe. To be truly this big-brained, mundane meth holiday, Crown tea, Sargonic thinker.
But no matter how hard these skeptics huffed and puffed, the alt-right remained largely unmoved. In fact, such was their lack of lasting effect that serious doubts within the community as to the overarching point began to surface.
So there's been this mighty shit show going on, which mostly I've been out of because I've been moving. Now, bear in mind, I've not had a chance to go into too much detail here, so a quick summary seems to be Kraut and T decided that he was going to take on the alt-right over race realism. And let's be honest here, genetics, sure, genetics are a real factor, no question. But the folks who tend to walk down this path seem to be heading towards the eugenics route on almost as flaky grounds.
The skeptics' refusal to entertain any form of identitarianist or race realist arguments of the right, or play the neo-Marxist identity politics of the left, rendered the community a fence-sitting joke at odds with reality. As cute as their individualist utopia may appear, the world and its people are simply not wired that way.
But, I mean, Porsalin, I think he's very much understanding of the, not just the decline of Sargon, but how Sargon got where he was. And, recognizing that you can't be Boogie or Mundane Matt or Sargon sitting on the fence all the time and pretending to be this big brain centrist, it's reality, but it also speaks to. Porsalin's someone I imagine who resides left of Anglin, but right of Sargon. And I think he can see through the idea that you don't have to take a side. You do have to take a side. And Sargon, Mundane Matt, Meth Holiday, Shoe on Head, Arbor Skeptic, whoever, pretending to carve this position that was simply designed to keep them in YouTube shekels and to stop them from being deplatformed. It's cynical, it's shameful, yet they carried on with it for as long as they possibly could, to the point where Sargon eventually had to make a movement for these big brain centrists, a movement which he was ejected from. He himself was ejected from this movement.
And as they continued having their collective arses handed to them left and right, the skeptics would soon retreat in droves to their array of super exclusive Discord servers in preparation for Operation Fight Dirty.
With Sargon, I don't think Sargon was in Discord at that point in time. Sargon used to operate from a Skype group, of which all of the skeptic community was a part.
Now, one thing I find funny in regards to mischievousness in your server is Ryan Falk later went on to have a live stream where Drolasta and David Sherratt were on there, again, both members of your server. He accused him of pedophilia and then said they would be posting evidence of this pedophilia and then never posted any evidence of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and?
Well, I guess what I'm saying, Crowd, is it sure seems like all the people involved in this server have tried to attack people on the alt-right in as many underhanded ways as possible.
That was a really stupid thing to attack him on.
Interestingly, doing gay shit was a favourite pastime for the skeptics. The Candid scandal, for instance, saw influencers such as the Amazing Atheist shill for social network Candid. This deliberate selling out for pay had infected skeptics like TJ Kirk to such a desperate degree that the balding troglodyte agreed to produce sponsored content, taking down fellow YouTuber Harmful Opinions, a staunch critic of the service's sketchy business practices, at the behest of Candid's CEO.
Now, for me, Candid was always this very autistic, who cares about this shit controversy. But if you want the TLDR, there was a guy called Harmful Opinions who was pointing out that these were basically paid shills for Candid. These people, these skeptics, were paid shills for Candid. And Harmful Opinions was pointing this out. And Sargon and his ilk were attacking him, calling him a liar, saying that he was being disingenuous, that he was a fraud, that people should... I think they went as far as to say that he was mentally ill, a stalker, obsessed. All of the quotes that they've been throwing at people criticizing their Lord and Savior were being used against Harmful Opinions. And eventually Harmful Opinions was proven right. So that's the TLDR on Candid. I think Porsalin goes into a bit more detail on it. But I mean, at the time, no one cared about it really. It was the collusion that mattered.
Those sponsored by Candid were then contractually forced to endure a long period of not criticising the platform, all in exchange for a big barrel of cold hard cash.
Candid were able to convince skeptics such as Armored Skeptic, Shoeonhead, and The Amazing Atheist to do sponsored videos for them, where they all touted how great it was. It's not like Candid was using the AI bot I previously mentioned to filter out negative comments. It's not like they were paying people to attack harmful opinions, and it's not like the skeptics that were shilling for them were forced to sign 2-year non-disparagement agreements, preventing them from saying anything negative about the app. No, of course not. Candid wasn't doing anything shady. Harmful Opinions is just a paranoid conspiracy theorist.
The platform's proprietary algorithm became subject to wide condemnation from outside the skeptic community, and with the ability to mass censor negative comments without any sort of specified standard, this entire saga left a sour taste in critics' mouths.
And comments in Candid go through an NLP algorithm which analyzes.
Yeah, so I will say that Porsalin's gone. He's put far too much of Candid in this documentary. Really, none of it really matters really to Sargon, other than the fact that he ganged up on Harmful Opinions, presented him as someone that he wasn't, defamed him simply because he wanted to cover up this collusion.
And detect sentiment, detects things like slander and hate speech. A machine is going to detect if you're being hateful or spiteful or annoying, and it's going to decide whether your comment or your post should stay on, or this is something which should be taken out.
And it is a fun app. I genuinely love it. I'm not saying that because I'm being paid to say it.
I love the fact that I can go on there and look at things like shower thoughts, like this one, where Sincere Raptor writes, "What if our dreams are us in alternate universes?"
We're going to skip the Candid stuff because it was boring at the time and it's even boring now. Right, Bearing, Amazing Atheist, right, Sargon defaming Harmful Opinions.
Who mindlessly fed from Candid's rotten teat.
And even if they did no research, the people sponsored by...
So this is Harmful Opinions, this brain. And he was basically the only one at the time pointing out the collusion. You know, he was the Fox Mulder of this Candid conspiracy, and he was pointing it out, and he'd be called a liar, like I say, defamed from Sargon. And they tried to paint him as mentally ill, as a stalker, as obsessed. They did every dirty trick in the book. And eventually, just as Anita, just as all of these people that Sargon's put himself against, eventually Tim Pool, it's not Tim Pool, is it? What's his name? Tim something was proven right.
Candid, thanks to Baring, who was also sponsored, telling me about this, are given a list of talking points that suggests they mention it. This means people like Shoeonhead, who in the past has viciously attacked social media platforms for using similar shadow banning systems, chose to, when paid, not mention that thing she hates. Not mention that thing her audience would hate in what she's advertising. The CEO of this company was negotiating rewards with people to track me. Being in a situation where you know people around you.
All right, we're going to skip this Candid stuff. Like I say, it was right. Let's just go with Sargon calling him a liar.
A resident bearded thumb, Monday Matt, another close friend of our chief skeptic faggot, Sargon of Akkad. He was dramatically exposed as a mass false flagger, in particular of poor Ickle Matt's schoolyard bully, Dane Pesos of the Soyless Matt Show. Having been forced to reveal his flagging history on Ethan Ralph's The Kill Stream, Matt the Fat Jarbo admitted to being what is often referred to as bitch-made, as his inability to take criticism saw him attempt to remove all detractors from YouTube's platform altogether.
You disingenuous piece of shit. Delete your fucking channel, get a real job, and try to make something of yourself. Because as far as YouTube is concerned, as far as the internet is concerned, you're a joke.
And that means something when it comes from Toad, you know?
You're the village idiot, and you have no chance of recovering from this. And do not even think of flagging this video, because if you do, I swear to God, I will...
As for Crowton T, an ostentatious gas bag with an affected accent, losing face to the alt-right was not an option. For example, following the release of a supposedly controversial video by alleged white supremathot Rage After Storm.
Right, so we all know the stuff with Kraut, you know. Porsalin is obviously tying these characters together. But I think what's lacking in this documentary is the sort of fallout and how they were all begging Sargon to come in and save them. Even right up to the end, Kraut was begging Sargon to come and save him, to swoop in. Mundane Matt was begging Sargon to redeem him, to run defense for him. And V was the go-between here. V was going between, Mundane Matt and Sargon, trying to work out a way where they could both save face. Mundane Matt on his knees, Kraut on his knees, begging Sargon to stop his hemorrhaging subscriber base. But I think that's what this documentary is lacking so far. This is a bit about Kraut doxing, or Kraut being involved in the dox of Coach Red Pill. Sargon doing a hit piece on Coach Red Pill. Coach Red Pill responding, listening to it. Warski setting fire to his nipple. I think this here is where we're going to skip to.
Coach Red Pill's data was Sargon, and Sargon said we shouldn't do this. That's what FJWs do. So you knew he was doing underhanded shit, right?
No, listen. I'll tell you exactly what I know, and then we'll understand.
So, I mean, trying to save face here, Sargon, this is the birth of the stepfather Don Sargoni meme. Sargon knew is the TLDR on this. Sargon knew about Kraut trying to farm Coach Red Pill's docs and trying to spread it and trying to paint Coach Red Pill as a fraud and a charlatan. Sargon knew but did nothing about it. But he did record it. He had the nous to record it. And here he is trying to backpedal, trying to obfuscate and lie, basically, to former friends and his Romanian manservant.
Kraut was looking into the histories of people like Coach Red Pill's Russia Today and his website and stuff like this, stuff I just don't care about. I don't find that to be necessarily underhanded. He didn't say he was doing anything with this information, but I told him repeatedly, there's just no point. And if you're thinking about it, then don't, obviously. But there's just no point going into this because this isn't addressing any of the arguments.
As for the skeptics' ongoing debate with the alt-right, Sargon would eventually roll up his wrinkled sleeves and finally participate. His debate with Andrew Anglin of the Daily Stormer would be best remembered both by Sargon's series of pretentious scoffs in place of well-reasoned argument and his inability to simply engage in any sort of natural human conversation. The latter point was further emphasized by anti-Israeli Jew-fucker Mike Enoch.
Do you grant the moral premise that white people have a right to their own country, and you're just saying that it's impossible to make that happen?
Well, I said at the beginning that I didn't really want to debate the talking points because there's no point. Andrew, listen, right? Look, I thought we'd be able to have an honest conversation because as far as I'm concerned,
so I'm being honest.
Stop.
But go ahead. We'll get back to the question.
Stop being defensive and let me speak.
Have you even read Sargon?
I mean, this is so far back now that Baked Alaska's here, and he's not the butt of everyone's jokes. It's amazing to see how far the sort of fall from grace that Baked Alaska's had, simply because there was not a platform for which he was raised with any sort of prominence anyway. I mean, before his encounter with Sargon, he was known as the guy that was pepper sprayed during Knoxville. And now he's known as the guy who should have been blinded during Charlottesville.
Have you read Siege? Sargon.
Do you mind not interrupting, man?
Have you read Siege?
Do you mind not interrupting? Is that okay? I'm trying to have a conversation.
Show some respect, buddy. If I was on your channel, I would give you respect. All right. So you're on my show.
You're not just laughing and interrupting me a second ago.
I'm the moderator. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah,
it's
which
my
means
show.
You shouldn't do that. You should show.
No, I can do my show however I want.
It's not showing respect. Even like
everything necessitates violence. Integration necessitated violence. They put guns at the backs of little kids to integrate them with the blacks.
Then stop being a fucking pussy about saying that your solution needs violence.
That's not like a gotcha. I've said
I didn't say it was
requires
a
force.
Gotcha.
The violence.
Andrew, listen, Andrew, right? As far as I'm concerned, you're a Nazi. There's no point trying to gotcha on a Nazi.
All Sargon has to do is be honest. Sargon, why can't you go into a thing I don't know if they'll ever hear this, and like maybe this is gonna get clipped and put on YouTube. I hope it does, because this is my message to Sargon.
What this was, though, I mean, this was people taking Sargon in a manner that Sargon expected to be taken. I mean, this is people trying to walk Sargon back from cowdom, I suppose, trying to treat Sargon with a bit of academic credos, trying to treat him as though he's a person in good faith, someone who could hold a reasonable debate, someone who could come into something with well-researched talking points and argue them well. The past year, 18 months, to nearly 2 years, has proven that that's simply something that Sargon's incapable of. And that all of this hot air around Sargon at the time was simply unwarranted, because basically Sargon's just a fat chav. Just a fat chav. All of this hot air and trying to get Sargon to engage intellectually on X and Y and this and that, it was all hot air, because it was never going to get through to Sargon. Sargon's never going to be anything other than this fat chav. And now that he's making a spectacle of himself on the streets of England, having fish thrown at him, having milkshakes poured over his head, having horse shit emptied at his feet, I mean, they aren't engaging with him intellectually in any sort of proper debate. They simply the average man on the street recognizes who Sargon is and knows how to interact with him on a base level. It took the alt-right, it took those outside of the skeptic community a long time to realize this, that the only way to really interact with Sargon is just entirely through mockery. But eventually people saw sense, and eventually people wised up to who Sargon was and how he behaved and how his shenanigans informed his entire viewpoint on the world.
Why can't you just fucking sit down with people and talk to them? What the fuck is wrong with you?
Why does it have to be a snake attack thing?
What are you, fucking Cobra Commander? Who the fuck are you? Like, what? You can't like sit down and be straightforward with people. Tell people what you think. They'll tell you what they think. Then you could say, here's where we disagree. Let's fucking talk about it. What's the issue here? What's the issue? But it's all, people hate you, Sargon. People fucking hate you because you're full of shit. You're full of shit. You're a piece of slimy fucking goo, and everyone hates you because of it.
Despite being accused of bad faith arguments, Sargon was not deterred. Having previously debated the likes of Millennial Woes and Jared Taylor on the case for white nationalism, albeit not in the least bit successfully, Cole's next target was alt-right figurehead and suspected homosexual Richard Spencer.
The ideas came first, the actions came second.
Oh, so they
I think this is where a bit of Porsalin's chronology is wrong. I know that he says he's presented it out of sequence, but I mean, he is saying that one thing leads to another, and he is saying that his next port of call was to debate Richard Spencer. No, I mean, the Richard Spencer argument was sort of the birth of a lot of this stuff. I don't think Sargon would have gone nearly as far as he has done without that Richard Spencer argument. And it predated that Andrew Anglin Baked Alaska confrontation, and it predated Mike Enoch saying that everyone hates you, Sargon. This was the cornerstone for which everything happened. This was the arc, the point from which all of Sargon's failures, recent failures, were birthed, especially the liberalists.
Read philosophy, and then they decided to create the United States.
That's exactly how it worked.
Keep dreaming.
Have you read Common Sense by Thomas Paine? Have you read any of these things?
Yes.
And how can you sit there and say that that's not the case?
Because I don't buy into this fairy tale of Americanism, which you unfortunately do.
I get it.
Denial of a fairy tale, yes.
But that doesn't make them not true.
Both of you will disagree. Wolves, did you want to weigh in?
It's crazy. All of these people on this stream have had a terrible 2 years, appalling. I mean, Warski now is not just a shadow of his former self, but the Warski now looks like a depraved animal. He's skin and bone, or perhaps the opposite of that. He's been this cum dumpster for anyone who would take him in, anyone who'd have him on their sofa. You know, he's gone through all of these births and deaths, mainly deaths. You know, Knoxville, the stuff around Miami, and now here, and now, you know, if we look at Warski now, he's, you know, a few streams in a bathtub later. The man is more than just a shell of his former self. This was peak Warski. This was when he's on his deathbed, which I'm sure is going to be soon. He's going to look. I imagine he'll look back on this with rose-tinted spectacles as this is when he was at the height of his success. You know, this very stream was trending on YouTube at the time. You know, this was as popular as Warski's going to get. You know, this was his. I don't know, as much money as he was going to make in one single stream. He's never going to retain or recover former glories. You know, and imagine if this right here is the heyday for you. I mean, it's almost enough to make you want to get the noose and string yourself up right now, isn't it?
I think it's absurd.
All right, we can skip this fat homosexual.
Said you have a conception of your intellectual abilities that are greater than reality, and that is a difficult place for any human being to be. That is my description of you, Sargon, and I am sorry, but I have to be honest to you, and you should actually thank me for being so honest.
Yeah, and it was that line alone that launched Sargon's descent, I suppose. I mean, him being deplatformed, demonetized, him becoming the national lolcow of the UK. Spencer's responsible for it, and props to him. So this is where Porsalin's documentary kind of descends into just clips of streams, and I suppose it was always going to be that, especially in something covering Sargon. It was always going to be clips of streams that happened last year. But I suppose in order to have a bit of brevity, we've got to go to the liberalists, and we've got to go to when Sargon started appearing in real life events, one of which I was an attendee of. Let's go to that.
Godzilla 37, $5 Canadian. Sargon will never.
Also, I mean, JF, we knew about the potatoes at the time, but we did not know that he'd retain a potato. He'd keep a potato on side and have her appear in streams and have a rant and rave and say, you think you're spiritual leader, to people like No White Guilt. You know, little did we know that his potato would be discovered riding around the streets of Canada nude on a bicycle, playing a violin, screeching into the wind. Little did we know the depths of the perversion of JF. You know, at this time, I suppose at this time we all thought, you know, he was some serious intellectual weight that the alt-right could use. That certainly could have on side. I think a lot of the potato farming was overlooked in favor of that. But I mean, now, just as Warski, they've had this incredible fall from grace.
Face Enoch, enough said.
A succession of cringe-inducing IRL meetups followed, with social clubs filled with parliamentary LARPers. The entire charade was nothing more than a giant ego massage for Sargon, with no real plan of what he wanted these liberalists to actually achieve.
So, I mean, if you're new to the Sargon lore and you're just simply here to watch me analyze the Porsalin documentary, so Sargon, an hour or so after Richard Spencer said, "You're not as smart as you think you are," he decided he needed to become a leader of something, and he was going to call that group liberalists. And they were going to be a collective of individuals, and he was going to be the leader. And this here was the Liberalist Beer Hall Putsch. It was the first event of the aborted political party, the Liberalists. And the footage you're seeing was actually captured by my phone camera that I edit all my videos on. So I feel a bit of pride that Porsalin's decided to include such footage in his documentary.
Did you see the meetup, by the way, Tonka? The libertarianism meetup that happened?
Or the fight?
Again, like the Kumite, Tonka saw a failure. These people were on such what should I say, an altitude. 2 years ago that I don't think anyone could have predicted they'd have fallen this far.
No, the one that got infiltrated. Some guy showed up to film Sargon walking around the block like 8 times before going in to deal with these people.
No way.
Right, so we're on the trail of Sargon. So Sargon's just walked past me, and we are heading down here. He's just gone into this.
You know, I'm very happy and proud and glad that I've become a footnote even in the Sargonic canon. That whenever people will make a documentary now, they will use first-hand Godwinson OC in order to fully encapsulate Sargon's downfall, rise and fall. I hope that the same thing happens when people sort of take notice of Jahan's. I hope a lot of my work that I put into there will be used. So yeah, this is a great source of pride. I'm very pleased that that I'm woven into the story of Carl.
There we go. The Lord cometh.
Porsalin uses this documentary, this footage even, to illustrate Sargon's height. I mean, he's a really short guy. He's really, really short. What more is there to be said? But prior to this footage being released, no one was quite sure of how high, of how tall he was. He walks past a fire hydrant or like a stump, and people worked out his height to the centimeter. But prior to this, he used to LARP as like a 6'5" Chad. Do you know what I mean? Incredible, really, absolutely incredible. When I met him, I had like an ache in my neck from looking down. Appalling, really, and shameless that he would lie about his height in such an exaggerated way. I mean, he could have lied and said he was 5'9". You know, who'd have cared? But to say that he was like 6'5", something of preposterous and appalling, speaks volumes of the man. Really, it does.
His people await. Oh, he appears to be entering the pub that I'm in, actually. Right, so Sargon's just walked past his people, but he doesn't want to arrive before there's a great many of them gathered. So the footage I've just captured where I followed Sargon was sort of his shame, because he doesn't want to approach this small enclave of people. So he's rounding the building, he's doing laps of the block, he's walking past me frequently before he approaches this group of people.
3 hours later.
I mean, so you can see there that he's barely over the shoulders of those traps he's encircled by. Crazy. But this event as well, I mean, he threw his own birthday party, basically, and called it the start of a political movement, of a political group. As I say, shameless. The front of this man.
All in all, this was a brief and forgettable period for Sargon of Akkad, and the less said about this throng of conceited spurgs, the better.
So Sargon, what's with the fucking fart huffing?
Well, I think Louis explained it.
Well, you can explain it, because does he speak for you? I find it funny how he's going about it, and I find the name to be funny.
It's the only one I could think of. I mean, it logically makes sense, and it's not already taken. So, honestly, when someone who understands political philosophy explains to you why, like, being shocked that a group of individualists can form a group, you're going to feel really dumb.
That aged really well, did it not? That aged perfectly.
I'm not even joking, man.
Oh my god, do I need to read more? Do I need to read some more Locke to get up on your level?
I mean, the reason I'm talking about it on these like basic principle level is because the people we're dealing with disagree on the basic principle level.
And what people are you disagreeing with? Because you talked about your enemies in that video. So who are your enemies?
The SJWs and the alt-right.
So no. So the alt-right is your enemy.
Yeah. Have you not looked at the way they treat me?
Did they not treat you kindly?
Do you think they did?
I don't know. People talk shit on the internet all the time. I get shit talked about on the internet all the time.
So yeah, I mean, this is just a string of streams. I suppose, yeah, it would be hard for Porsalin to tell the story of Sargon without including lots of footage from streams. But I don't know. To me, a documentary is not a succession of stream clips. It's someone out in the wild. It's someone interacting with their environment. And I think the last portion of this documentary does deal with Sargon going out into the real world and becoming the Sargon we know today.
As the rhetoric in the chat significantly worsened, something magical happened.
Okay, so perfect. We've skipped forward to the point where he's talking about the white N-words. And he's raging on about being I'm a human being. I'm a human being. I don't deserve this. So fantastic point to skip to.
Sargon snapped.
You guys understand that I am a person. And look, yeah, like, sorry, Sarkisian, how dare I hurt sensitive feelings. Look, you carry on, but don't expect me to then have a debate with one of your faggots.
So this stream was over a year old before Patreon decided to use it in order to bury him, basically, to deplatform him. And then the mainstream press in England have used it nearly 2 years on. Surely Sargon would have known when he made these comments that these were career suicide. But these were a sleeper. These were like a bomb. Everyone sort of aware of these comments would use them and try and get their full potential realized. Because, I mean, this was going to stop any sort of political ambitions of Sargon stone dead. And if he were to continue, it would just make him into an even bigger joke than he already was. The fact that Sargon wasn't aware of this, and the fact that he still hasn't really apologized for doing this. I mean, maybe he does hold these beliefs, based Carl. But if I don't know. I don't see why he just doesn't apologize and then play their game and move forward. I mean, Patreon gave him so many chances during that back and forth. All he had to do was say, "I'm sorry for making those comments. I retract those comments. I put out an apology." Instead, he refused to do that and claimed to be this victim of deplatforming and censorship. This is him very definitely digging his own grave.
See, look, this is what I mean about the chat. I just can't be bothered to deal with people who treat me like this. It's really annoying. Like, you are acting like a bunch of niggers, just so you know. You act like white niggers. Exactly how you describe black people acting is the impression I get dealing with the alt-right.
In slight defense of Sargon, there was clearly a wider context for his use of the N-word. After all, he was simply making the point that the chat were acting in exactly the same way as what Sargon saw as their racist stereotype of black people. But in doing so, he had played directly into their hands. This audio clip could now be weaponized against him at any time.
But again, weaponized against him? I mean, this isn't people using his own words against him out of context, really. I mean, this is his own buffoonery and his own words that he said. I mean, this isn't weaponized. He's crafted his own weapon. He sharpened his own blade, and he's stabbed it in his own heart. Do you know? I mean, this isn't people trying to distort something and weaponize it. This is Sargon digging his own grave and then pretending that grave wasn't already dug for a year and a half. And then when Patreon finally got round to it, going, "Oh, I can't believe this has been weaponized. This is completely taken out of context. This is people against me. This is just trolling." I'm sorry, Sargon, but you did this. You are entirely responsible for your own actions.
Especially if Carl harboured any sort of political ambitions going forward. Once again, this represented another total lack of tact and foresight for Mr. Benjamin.
Carl. No, what we just heard you say there.
And here we have the Fox Mulder of Birmingham, still rallying against Carl, still going against the bullshit, the conspiracy that Carl Sargon of Akkad was peddling. All of these years later, from the founding of Gamergate right until now, Kevin Logan's been there, a constant thorn in Sargon's side, his constant companion, even longer than V. Kevin Logan's been there to call out Sargon's bullshit.
That's a prime example of something I've talked about with you before. That you seem to think that you're really, really good and adept at co-opting the ways in which the alt-right talk and flipping it back on them in some sort of satirical way, almost sort of meta-satire or whatever. But you really fucking aren't.
As it happens, involving himself in the...
So here's Sargon. This is the ill-fitting suit debacle. And you can see here that he's wearing his national insurance card, bizarrely, on his lapel. And he's interviewing some member of UKIP, of the European Parliament. Yet he's holding the microphone like 500 yards away from the man's face. So whatever quality audio being picked up, or potentially quality audio being picked up, is just naught at this point. You know, it'd be a miracle if they pick up any muffling that Sargon's got, you know, in his elbow. He has simply no media training, to the point where he doesn't even know how to hold a microphone to conduct an interview.
Wider political sphere is exactly what Sargon the Stupid would do next. Completely disregarding his terribly checkered past and its impact on his political profile, Carl Benjamin would follow the example set by a drunk Scottish halfwit and join the UK Independence Party.
The madman has fucking done it, and to be honest with you, what other options do we have at this point? This is fucking important, in my opinion.
So here's what Porsalin's done, which really should have, maybe it should have taken a bit more prominence in the Candid stuff. Count Dankula was big on the sort of Sargonic skeptic circuit. You know, you have to remember that he sort of came from nowhere. He got covered by InfoWars. He got dug up by Sargon, Mundane Matt. All of them were making videos, you know, oh, the Nazi pug, Nazi pug, Nazi pug. And it had a lot of cachet with sort of regular people going, oh, I can't believe this guy's been silenced for a joke. I can't believe he's being arrested or potentially sent to prison for a joke. Count Dankula became Sargon's, you know, other right-hand man. You know, there's V, there's Count Dankula, you know, but arguably, you know, Sargon treats Dankula with a bit more respect than V. They are now colleagues in a political party that they've joined, and they are now, you know, at the top of that party, arguably, running for candidacy of European Parliament for their respective regions of Great Britain. So it's strange that Porsalin's left out the sort of friendship with Count Dankula that Carl shares. But bear in mind that it's a strange friendship that you could argue that Sargon is a parasite upon. Sargon clearly saw the Nazi pug stuff as a means for which he could be as offensive as possible. He could he could now have a justification for the rape joke tweeted at Jess Phillips, because he could simply say, I was simply joking like Count Dankula. I'm being censored just like Count Dankula. You all know who Count Dankula is. You know, all of you Twitter comedians who defended him. I'm just like you, Stephen Fry. I'm just like you, David Baddiel. I'm just like you. Who was the other one that defended him? Jonathan Pye. You know, we are one and the same. We are comics. We are shitlord extraordinaires. But that hasn't washed. You know, the Sargon of today. I mean, David Baddiel's and all of the comedians that once defended Dankula have said that they've been duped. They've been duped by Sargon and Dankula, and that they were effectively. These people, I mean, the comedians see them as, the Twitter comedians, I suppose, see them as incredibly far right and sort of insidious. But on a base level, they recognize that Sargon's a bullshitter, and they don't want to be associated with him. So when Sargon's saying, oh, you know, I'm just being a funny, edgelord, offensive George Carlin, you know, don't use my name in vain. George Carlin saying. George Carlin is rising from his grave and saying, don't use my name as justification for your disgraceful actions and shenanigans and behaviors. You know, you can't pretend to be, you know, a shitlord extraordinaire and this meta comic, this meta comedian, and also on the other hand pretend that you're this free thinker, this Plato, this Aristotle in fat chav form. You don't get to wear those hats when you've been called out on your bullshit. But I mean, yeah, Porsalin should have really gone into the Count Dankula friendship.
So I've decided I'm going to be joining UKIP too. By the time that this video is up, I'll be a member of UKIP, and I'll leave a link in the description if you want to come with me and Dankula and join UKIP as well, because fuck the way things are going.
Count Dankula, a self-titled comedian famed for teaching his dog to see Kyle, pledged to join the party upon receipt of 10,000 retweets. Knowing such a move will likely trigger the lips, Sargon followed, as too did Paul Joseph Watson and Milo Yiannopoulos.
Sargon followed because he realized that his YouTube platform was going to die, and he needed to transition into the real world if he wanted to continue making the exorbitant sums of money that he'd been making previously. He'd gotten so used to his 12 grand a month Patreon money, his at least 20 grand a month as a whole coming in from his internet career. He'd gotten so used to that he'd become, accustomed to all the traps, all the cocaine, and everything else that he was consuming, that he was hammering through on a daily basis. And he didn't want that to stop. So he had to realize some sort of IRL transition, some sort of IRL plan, adaptation, in order to save this degenerate lifestyle. And here we are. He thought liberalists were the answer. That died. Then he saw Dankula migrate to UKIP, and he thought, okay, I can get Paul Joseph Watson in on this, and I will leech off that success. And now he's this meat shield. Dankula's campaign has gone relatively quietly. I've not heard any sort of... certainly when I open the front page of a newspaper, I don't see, headlines calling Dankula a defender of the abuse of young boys. As these are articles and headlines that are being printed about Carl of Swindon every single day. So he's become a meat shield for all criticisms aimed at UKIP. He's just a joke. He's a national lolcow.
We really were in for some epic bants.
You really want to know why I joined UKIP? But for all of their salty goodness, none of those headlines.
It's interesting to note that Paul Joseph Watson has taken a very, very large step back, especially as Sargon's campaign has been in full flow. He's taken such a step back that he's managed to get Milo, to return. And Sargon's had to bring in Milo, to accompany him in his white van around Exeter and Taunton and Totnes and the southwest of England. I'm sure that a lot of Sargon's messages are going unread by Paul Joseph Watson. I'm sure he's not responding or returning Sargon's calls anymore. I'm sure Paul Joseph Watson regards this UKIP joining as a massive misstep and a fiasco.
The new face of UKIP, the free speech extremist who could make UKIP dangerous again.
The media response was equally damning, with Right Wing Watch running the headline, "Self-described classical liberal YouTubers join far-right European political party." Meanwhile, The Guardian chose the headline, "UKIP welcomes social media activists linked to alt-right into party." And finally, in Russia Today, Count Dankula and Sargon are simply labelled as alt-righters who joined UKIP to spite anti-race campaigners.
Enough with this goofy, cringeworthy self-indulgence and self-promotion. Getting the right deal on Brexit is important, and if it's going to happen...
okay, I don't need to listen to any more of James Allsop. Basically, you need to know that Sargon went to European Parliament.
To simply listen to them.
And then he thought he was a big boy. He thought he was a big political player at the political table. He didn't realize that he was just a joke in an ill-fitting suit. And he thought, okay, now I can start ragging on people like Jim, who have been mocking me for my unwarranted self-importance. So he starts a stream saying, hello, Jim. And in that stream, he promises to dox Jim. And he goes as far as calling Jim a groomer, a child groomer, insinuates that he's a paedophile, claims to have his docs, what have you. And then Jim does a stream.
Proud of his outfit, doesn't he? Isn't he?
Mocking his suit, saying he's this Applebee's waiter. We all know the law. This is Sargon Porter Watson with Batten. And I think here is where we start the campaign, the UKIP campaigning.
Considerably to make any sort of difference to the passing of Article 13, Sargon's revolving door of half-baked ideas now creaked to a graceless halt. In a cheap attempt to win back favour amongst his vocal adversaries, he would unexpectedly return to Ethan Ralph's The Kill Stream. In a peculiar hangout featuring former Gamergating comrade Mr. Mezzica, Sargon would spend over 40 minutes filibustering to thousands of bemused listeners.
And this is Gamergate 2.0. This is him. I think Porsalin left out the Bannon interview, but basically the Bannon interview, had I been in charge of this documentary, the Bannon interview would have been, the staple for which Sargon decided to launch Gamergate 2.0. But basically, Sargon interviewed Bannon, and from that interview, he thought that he was 2 degrees separation from Donald Trump. And he thought, therefore, that he could get Donald Trump to tweet about Gamergate and he would be validated. His harassment of Saint Anita would be legitimized because Donald Trump, the President of the United States, has tweeted about it. And therefore, Sargon went on Ethan Ralph's Kill Stream and decided to present this very, very big-brained take. But it speaks to his delusion, really. Strange that he didn't include this in the documentary Porsalin, but he simply included the Gamergate 2.0 stuff.
It's grooming because that's exactly what it is. When a guy...
So that's this is Carl's baseless accusations against Jim, calling him a paedophile, a child groomer. A back and forth between Jim, and here we go. This is Sargon IRL going for it.
Bite the impulsive UKIPper square on the bottom. Yet another audio clip was unearthed, this time of Carl Benjamin appearing sympathetic to child molesters, saying how it depends on the child, before screaming, but it's true, to claims that the Catholic Church shares the same belief.
I was well under the age of 11 when I started having sex. And so what I like to do is put people on the on the other side of the argument. It's like, what you have to do is you have to say that someone like me, not anybody else, but me, that I was too stupid to appreciate the nature and quality of what I was doing at the time. But please convince me I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, I think it depends on the child, really, doesn't it?
So this was a bomb, a time bomb that was waiting for Sargon. Long before, actually, he made those white N-word rants at that live stream chat. This was waiting for him in the wings, and now it's all over the press. I mean, you ask the man on the street in England, who's Sargon? Oh, he's the rape guy, he's the defends paedophilia guy, and he's the white N-words guy. People mention his name in the same breath as they would Fred West, Harold Shipman, Peter Sutcliffe, Carl Benjamin. I mean, he lives in infamy in the words and thoughts and minds of the British people.
Because some kids...
That's what the Catholics say.
Well, it's true. It's
Wait, what?
True, though,
No, wait a minute! Just the car.
Okay, we don't need any dolphin noises over this. But sadly, or suppose fortunately, whatever one you want to sit, the story of Carl is sort of intertwined now with Ethan Ralph and his war with Ethan Ralph. I think Sargon won in the bout against the Gunt. I think you could hand Sargon that little victory there. I mean, Sargon's definitely coming across as slightly better, slightly less covered in shit than the Gunt, but they're both really in the gutter at this point. They're both really at rock bottom. But I'd say, Sargon's slightly edged out. Sargon's slightly a less dirty winner than the Gunt. But yeah, the story of Sargon is forever going to be tainted with his interactions with Ethan Ralph. So a lot of streaming. Let's fast forward to Sargon's actual campaigning, his UKIP campaigning. A lot of war with Jim. God, I mean, if it's this easy to make a documentary where you're just stringing together stream clips, it says a lot, doesn't it? Right.
Ed take a retarded stand against the platform's terms of service.
So I woke up the other morning to thousands of messages from all my various friends and subscribers.
This is him being banned from Patreon and then setting up Subscribestar, which was a Russian Chinese pyramid scheme that that is only ever going to cause misery and financial misery for his Kekistani liberalists. Lots of stuff on Patreon, bizarrely. Here we go. Here, I think we're finally on the UKIP campaign.
I was some kind of sinner beyond redemption.
With the political state in Britain reducing the fundamental concept of democracy to a series of best out of 3 dice rolls, UKIP stood ready to launch an all-out attack on the anti-Brexiteers. And with the UK now extending the leave date to late 2019, parties readied their MEPs for the upcoming European parliamentary elections. In what has to be the most thoughtless of selection decisions in global politics, UKIP leader Gerald Batten for some reason approved the nomination of Carl Benjamin as MEP candidate for Gloucestershire.
My name is Carl Benjamin. I'm a member of the United Kingdom Independence Party, and I'm campaigning to be an MEP for the southwest of England.
So our favorite Applebee's waiter is going to be running for an MEP position, one of 2 candidates in his geographical area.
Yeah, so Sargon announces his candidacy. So does Dankula. Dankula's running for office alongside Tommy Robinson. And then the mainstream media start digging into Sargon. Who is this man? And they don't even smear him. They're not these dirty, dirty smear merchants that Sargon's selling merchandise, criticizing. No, they simply used his own words and published his own words verbatim. That's all they've done. That's all they've done.
Fury over his...
And these headlines are splashed all over the UK mainstream press. Everyone in England now knows who Sargon is. All of this esoteric lore we've been covering over the past 3 hours is now not just esoteric anymore. It's now in the vocabulary, in the lexicon of the average man on the street.
Remarks that he wouldn't even rape a Labour MP. Now, a senior UKIP source has told the Mail on Sunday that they have passed a dossier to the Wiltshire police containing deeply offensive remarks made by Mr. Benjamin, an online vlogger who calls himself Sargon of Akkad.
The situation for the party went from bad to really fucking bad, as comments accusing Jewish people of identity politics over the Holocaust, before claiming to not give a shit about the event, surfaced. To make matters even worse, Sargon's official UKIP Twitter account was then banned due to his prior behaviour on the platform. This prompted claims of election meddling, as many believed correctly that as a political candidate, he deserves the same platform as his opponents. But with mounting pressure from the press following headlines such as The Sun's top UKIP candidate says it's okay to rape young boys in sick YouTube rants.
I mean, this is Sargon's optics in England. Do you know? I mean, it's not just you. I wouldn't even rape you. It's not even that. It's paedophilia. I mean, he's wrapped up in this stuff. Do you know? People misunderstand. You know, people just think, oh, you know, it's Sargon running for office. Well, no. I mean, Sargon is seen in the same, you know, public image as a murderer, as some sort of infamous Yorkshire Ripper. You know, Fred West, Peter Sutcliffe, Harold Shipman, Carl Benjamin. You know, this is a man who will live in infamy in the eye of the British public now forever. You know, when he dies, his obituary will be, "It depends on the child," and this rape tweet, and then his defense, and then him saying he might rape women. You know, victims of sexual assault. Really, really great optics. I mean, this is optics that I don't even think the worst of the alt-right. The worst of the alt-right didn't fuck up this much when it came to optics. You know, I mean, as of yesterday, he was walking around with, in fact, him and his followers were presenting and displaying the Kekistani flags in a Wetherspoons in Exeter, and people were pointing out that, you know, the Kekistani flag is based on the Nazi flag. You know, it would have been less embarrassing for him to have proudly displayed Nazi flags and Nazi memorabilia in a Wetherspoons than it was for him to have displayed Kekistani memes and flags and memorabilia and merchandise all over this Weatherspoons pub in Exeter. It would have been less embarrassing had he have just gone full Nazi, instead of this weird Kekistani liberalist pseudo horseshoe, big-brained centrist LARP. It's crazy. Not even the worst of the alt-right fucked it up this much when it came to optics.
It's hard to see Sargon being part of the political scenery for too long.
You went to the Wiltshire Police and got my number to talk to me about a 5-year-old stream where I was having a conversation in the abstract with a victim of sexual assault. That's really interesting. About what? Why would they? Okay. And what did I say the age of consent should be in that stream? You don't know? Yes, I did. At 1905 timestamp, I said exactly what I think it is. You are the shittest journalist that has ever existed. You just go at 1905. Go.
So Sargon, he's been calling the journalists that have been writing these articles against him, and some of his capos have as well. His team, they've been. This conversation is, as you'd expect. It's Sargon ranting down a phone, expecting the journalist who has more stories on their plate than just Sargon, and expecting them to know timestamps, expecting them to actually give a fuck of who Sargon is. These people write an article, with, quote him verbatim, and then just move on to the next thing, move on to the next story. This is some novelty vegetables being shown at a fair somewhere. The rain is slightly less frequent than it was a few weeks prior. We've got a heat wave. There's going to be snow. Who gives a shit? These people are paid journalists. They're not simply there to attack Sargon. Sargon's part of an ever-changing news cycle. And when he calls them up and says, "Oh, you didn't give the full context. You didn't transcribe the entire It Depends on the Child video." Well, why should they? Why should they care? Sargon calling them a shit journalist for actually presenting the news in a digestible fashion and quoting him verbatim is just appalling. It's bizarre. It's bizarre that his fans lap this up, that think that, Sargon calling a journalist is an epic win. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane.
Go watch that fucking timestamp, you dirty, dirty smear merchant. Holy shit, you should be embarrassed of yourself. What do you think you do? Honestly.
A media firestorm followed, with The Independent highlighting Sargon defending his use of the N-word, saying, "I find racist jokes funny." The Mail Online took the fight to Gerald Batten himself, claiming he defended...
Now, Gerald Batten, the leader of UKIP, has become 2019 V. He's having to run defense on Sargon constantly during this election cycle. It's quite harrowing to watch the man be systematically broken every time he's asked about Carl's comments.
Rape tweet about Labour MP as satire. So dire was the situation that UKIP's own Gloucestershire website was taken down in protest of Carl Benjamin's MEP candidacy. But Batten would not be deterred and would rather see his party dragged into Sargon's pin-headed weeds than focus on the urgent matters in hand, namely delivering Brexit.
You said it was a satirical comment. What did you mean by that?
Well, go and ask Carl Benjamin.
I mean, the life has died in this man's eyes. For all of his faults, he's made a far sterner stuff than Gerard Batten. Gerard didn't quite realise what it took to defend Sargon relentlessly over the course of many, many months. He didn't quite realise the extent of the work ahead of him, the monumental task that lay before him. Really, there should have been a secret hangout between Batten and V. V would have given him some primers, some tips on how to deal with it, on damage control. It would have been very instructive for Batten to have had.
This is a 3-year-old tweet that he did in the context of some Twitter trolling of what people were doing.
No, I'm not asking
And
about the comments he made. I'm asking about your defence of his comments, because he remains a UKIP candidate, and you are the leader of the
I
party.
mean, let's speculate. How many years of Batten's life has Sargon taken from him? You know, how many years of Batten's life has Sargon stolen from him during the course of this election campaign? The poor man looks like he's on death's door. The poor man looks like he's not going to survive till May the 23rd. And the one responsible for this untimely death will be Carl.
Party, and so you have made a decision to keep him as a
He
candidate.
has made an ill-considered remark. And if you were going to stop people taking part in public life or anything else because of some stupid, ill-considered remark of several years before, then I don't think you'd have anybody in Parliament or anywhere else in public life, because we all do things which we regret. He can defend it or not as he likes, but I'm not going to stop having a valuable candidate on the list, someone who can get us access to social media and thousands more people that we can talk to that we can't do.
But it's silly, isn't it? Because the majority of Sargon's, well, look, I mean, he's got nearly 1 million subscribers. These are 1 million subscribers dissipated across the world, right? The majority of his audience reside in America. The majority of his audience are basement-dwelling Kekistani neets, that don't leave the house. The ones we have seen leave the house, attend his rallies, his poxy excuses for a rally, have been fedora-wearing, Kekistani-wielding, flag-waving, crazy men, lunatics, Frank Zappa clones, people you wouldn't want anywhere near any political movement. But I don't think Batten quite understands this. He's been sold a lie, and he has to keep the lie. He has to run with it, basically, because he's got no other option. He's put Carl front and center of the party. Nigel's not there anymore. Farage ain't there to damage control, to work things out, to steer the ship. And now we've essentially got Britain's V leading UKIP trying to every single day put out fires started by Carl.
Through social media, where less and less people are actually listening to it or taking notice of it. So we're seeking other avenues to the public.
That kind of comment, though, has prompted some concerns.
How many times are you going to ask me the same
voters.
question? How many times are you going to ask me the same question?
The man is the man. 2019 V is completely defeated. I mean, he has nothing left. He's a tube of toothpaste that's been fully squozen or fully squeezed, and the one squeezing it is Sargon of a cat. And he's at the point now he's just going to walk out of this interview and cry, I imagine, in a darkened room.
Thank you very much.
As it stands, Carl Benjamin is set to contend the European elections as a UKIP representative. And although most of his positions in this ongoing media conflict are at the very least defendable, Sargon's political crusade is ultimately doing serious damage to both the UK Independence Party and to Brexit overall. The difficulty here is that Sargon is once right to feel victimised. What is happening to Carl Benjamin is by all metrics a political smear, and he has every right to at least feel...
This is where Porsalin is wrong. It's not a political smear. It's the mainstream media informing the electorate of who the man they are voting for, or potentially might be voting for, is. It's not a smear. That's simply what you'd call good journalism. I'd expect to be fully informed over a candidate as fucking notorious as Sargon. Do you know what I mean? Can you imagine not having any knowledge of Sargon and suddenly seeing the election leaflet pop through your letterbox? You'd think, okay, this fat chav just wants my vote, stands for free speech. Okay, I can get behind that. And then if you were to suddenly come across his comments, his shenanigans, just after he'd been elected into office, you'd shake. Your blood would run cold when you read "It depends on the child," when you read I wouldn't even rape you," when you read all of the despicable events that he's been involved in and we've been chronicling over the past 3 hours. It's one thing to quote someone, and literally publish who that person is and inform the electorate. And it's another to lie via omission, which is what Sargon wants them to do. Sargon wants the mainstream press to lie for him by not reporting his own despicable behaviors over the years.
Hard done by. But it was Sargon's own naivety and total lack of foresight that facilitated this entire shit show. Sargon's insatiable thirst for attention saw him put his ego ahead of both UKIP and the Brexit movement. He joined the party and then ran as an MEP, knowing full well that opposition research might find a few gems. For years, he allowed himself to be drawn into an unending saga of YouTubian dramatics, and has said and done some incredibly stupid things as a result. But so trapped in this e-celeb hookbox was Sargon that he unwittingly facilitated the media's distorted portrayal of Brexiteers as a bunch of child-raping shitposters. The Leave campaign was fundamentally successful because Nigel Farage's no-nonsense message was palatable to 17.4 million of your average Britons. Unfortunately, Sargon possesses neither the charisma to match Nigel's appeal as a political statesman, nor the public exposure to set voters at ease. Now, Sargon's fight for free expression is of course a worthy pursuit, but
basically, Sargon is controlled opposition, but he doesn't even know it. He doesn't know he's controlled opposition. UKIP are controlled opposition, right? They're a party of fruitcakes, loonies, people who would field someone like Carl, people who would field someone like Count Dankula as legitimate candidates. You know, they're a joke party. You know, they're a party now which another party, a relatively new party called the Brexit Party, can point at and go, oh, that's where all the racists went. That's where all the lunatics and fruitcakes went. You know, just look at them, you know. So essentially what it's done is split the Brexit vote, you know, controlled opposition. It's split the Brexit vote. It means that there isn't going to be a proper third party in the UK. There's still going to be this two-party system because arguably you could have had a useful third party with the Brexit Party heralded and led by Nigel Farage. But, you know, useful idiots, controlled opposition, UKIP, fronting someone like Carl. Carl doesn't know he's controlled opposition. Batten knows he's controlled opposition. Batten's in the pay of, you know, those state actors that want him in a place, that want him to be a joke candidate. Carl legitimately thinks he's standing for political office. He doesn't think it's one big gay op on the part of the civil service. Designed to split the Brexit vote, designed to stop there being a legitimate third party, designed even, if you want to take out the party system, to just get people on the streets, to get people actually mobilized and wanting a Brexit, actually claiming their Brexit via marches, via actual action on the streets. It's a useful idea. Vote for this, you know, buffoon. Vote for this count, this buffoon. Split your vote. Stop people from waking up and seeing reality. No, I mean, Sargon thinks he's legitimately being put forward as a legitimate politician. Crazy, absolutely crazy. But I mean, Porsalin's take here is fairly innocuous, I suppose.
It's far too important to allow one or two excitable edgelords to dilute the entire fucking narrative and veer the Leave campaign way off course. By playing directly into Remainer stereotypes of gammon-faced bigots, Sargon is completely undermining the entire Leave strategy. Furthermore, he has rendered the entire UKIP campaign an endless wiping of Carl Benjamin's spoiled anus. This desperate attempt to act out some sort of parliamentary fantasy on behalf of what is now a redundant party at the blind expense of the greater good, and all for that sweet taste of ego-massaging validation, shows just how big-brained Sargon of Akkad truly is.
Okay, and there we are. We finally got there. We've finally done it. I think it's been over 3 hours. Thank you all for staying with me via this very autistic analysis of Porsalin's entire documentary. I hope it's been fully comprehensive as a commentary, and I hope it's given some sort of critique as to I don't know, the creation, the Mona Lisa of esoteric Sargonism that's been compiled here. Now, shall we give this a like or a dislike? I want to teeter and give it a dislike just out of tradition. I don't know, where shall we go with this? I'm going to dislike it. going to dislike it. I'll give it a solid 7 out of 10. There were some things that sort of veered it away from being a proper documentary, or a documentary that would have had some sort of merit to someone outside of the sphere, such as, including long swathes of streams, stuff about Candid that didn't really matter, omitting the Bannon interview and its connection with Gamergate 2.0, and also omitting the collusion between Carl and Dankula. But I mean, I do like Porsalin's narration. I like the script that he was reading from. That was fantastic. I don't know if he'd written it himself or the team around him had written it, but I absolutely want to see more from Porsalin. He's probably one of the better people on YouTube, even though he does have a Patreon and a Reddit. I think he's going to do an amazing atheist documentary next, so that'll be an amazing experience. And we'll do the exact same thing with TJ, because I've arguably got more lore on TJ than I do Carl. But thank you all. I hope you've enjoyed the stream. The next time I see you, I suppose it'll be a conversation with PPP. So watch this space.